a lot of funding available to build trails and bike lanes, but they don't pay 100%. So there's state funding, there's federal funding, and they only pay 75 to 80%. So that was the excuse for all the communities in Southeast Michigan to not pursue these things. And so the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan created a $30 million pot of funding called the Greenways Initiative. They started giving out that 20 and 15 or 30% to these communities, and they started going after these federal grants. And they leveraged $130 million to build trails and greenways and bike lanes across Southeast Michigan. The city of Detroit really didn't get it. This is pre-bankruptcy, a long time ago, and it wasn't a priority for them, so they really didn't apply or get any money. So, but many of the nonprofits did. So Midtown Detroit got money, Riverfront, Detroit Eastside Community Collaborative, Southwest Detroit, and they all started building these greenways and bike lanes, and it was like, they got them built and they're like, we have to maintain these in perpetuity? How are we gonna pay for that? And we have to have insurance. And so there's all these issues. State Highway Commissioner, he didn't believe it was right to own a car. He didn't want to look biased. So he's an interesting guy. So he created MDOT. He also created the American Road Builders Association, which still exists to this day. And he was also very much involved in the League of American Wheelmen. This painting here was done by Seth Whipple. He was a Detroiter who typically did images of boats on the Great Lakes, but he entered a contest for the National League of American Wheelmen competition to try to get more members and talk about the importance of good roads. So they showed this woman riding her bike on this beautiful road with a really bad road off to the side where the farmers were using it. And the sign, which I think is kind of interesting, it says, "How to improve the public highways is now the topic of discussion. Are you doing your share?" Which is like, well, it still is a topic of discussion. So bicyclists laid the groundwork for the Motor City, and we got pushed to the margins. There's actually bicyclists pushed to the side here, and pedestrians are struggling to cross the street, and that's how we became the Motor City, thanks to largely bicyclists. I should mention too that, I'll mention it. So we're trying to get back to building good roads, and this often means separating bikes and pedestrians from cars, and getting cars to go the speed limit. So this is our bike map as it is today. A lot of the orange are just sharrows on the road, shared road. Not ideal, but a lot of times you got to get out there and establish something on the road, and then plan on upgrades. Keep pushing. So you can't get everything you want the first time out. But we have really wide streets, totally overbuilt. If you can stand in the middle of Woodward and take a picture and not have to worry about cars coming, you have way too many lanes. You don't need 10 lanes of traffic if you can stand in the middle of the road. So we've been able to do road diets, and the bottom picture is Michigan Avenue on its road diet. And the goal is to build facilities that accommodate people of all ages and abilities. Not just people wearing Lycra, but children, people going easy, even cargo vehicles, so you can make deliveries or carry people on pedicabs. And it's not like the city freestyles on this stuff. There's actually guidance on what to do. And it's largely based upon the speed limit of the road and how many cars there are, and that tells you what level of separation you need to have an all ages and facility. And that's largely done by NACTA, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, which Detroit is a founding member. And they have this excellent guide on how to choose it. So not everything's going to have a protected or separated bike lane. It just doesn't make sense, and it's expensive to do so. So you really want to focus on applying the right design for the right street. And I'm just going to go through some of the designs. You guys are probably already familiar with all this. This is Bagley. This is a shared street. They actually removed the curbs, and they changed the texture of the pavement so cars know, oh, something's weird here. I should maybe slow down. And it makes it easier to have festivals. There's no specific bike infrastructure. It's all kind of open, and everyone's got to get along. What's interesting is that there's no state law that supports this legally, so I guess you could technically be jaywalking still, but that's something we'll have to figure out eventually. Maybe we have to pass a state law to make this legal. So don't tell the police. We have slow streets. This is basically where you slow cars down, but you allow bikes to do things that cars maybe can't. So this is in Palmer Woods, where they install that traffic calming devices so cars can't like zoom through an intersection. Maybe they have to turn and go a circuitous route. But bikes, I advocated for make sure you make some cuts for bikes to go in and out, because bikes aren't the problem here, it's the cars. And so they went back and redesigned all their things to include little openings for bikes to get through. And it's great. I mean, you don't have cut through traffic, which was their main concern. They really just did not want a lot of cut through traffic, because cut through traffic generally behaves badly. So this is Cass Avenue. This was done because of the queue line, which is a whole other presentation in itself. Yeah, the FTA basically said to MDOT, okay, you're going to make biking much less safe for bicyclists on Woodward, so you need to improve Cass Avenue. And so MDOT gave the city of Detroit $1 million to improve Cass Avenue, and that's how those Cass bike lanes came up. But it was an issue there's still an issue with parking, and people wanted to cram as much parking in there as they could, so the design isn't as good as it could be. But again, it's a good, better, best. This is Livernois, which underwent a major road diet. Went from 4 travel lanes to 2, maybe 3. Before this, there was really narrow sidewalks. You could not have an outdoor cafe. I mean, they were really, really narrow, like uncomfortably narrow. There were no bike facilities, and the average speed of cars was 40 miles an hour, which is 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. And cars were going 60 and 70. So not a place where you want to sit at outdoor cafe, right? So after this went in, the average speed of cars is 30 miles an hour, which is the speed limit, which is great because you've solved the speeding issue without bringing law enforcement into it, which brings issues. When you start having police pulling over folks, and that's a whole nother thing you just don't want to have to deal with if you don't have to. If you can just fix the infrastructure, that's so much better. There's still going to be reckless drivers, and law enforcement can target them, but for everybody else, let's the infrastructure inform drivers how to behave nicely. And then, of course, we have some two-way cycle tracks. This is on Kirchhoff. This is a raised intersection. The idea is to slow cars down. It's kind of like a really long speed hump. The whole intersection's raised up. And similarly, this is a raised crosswalk for the Fitzgerald Greenway. Really concerning that, I was concerned with this Fitzgerald Greenway because you're going to have a trail crossing roads where cars aren't used to stopping or seeing people. And so that's what, in building this, cars could see, oh, something's going on here. Oh, it's a trail crossing, I need to slow down. Sometimes they don't do it. I mean, if you use the Dennis Archer Greenway and you see there's some raised crosswalks over there on Larned and Lafayette, some cars don't slow down, and you can see the divots in the pavement from that. Okay, this is just a pet peeve slide. This is not even Detroit, this is a road. But I do want to let people know that in Michigan, there are always crosswalks at every single leg of an intersection. Now in this, there's only 2 that are marked, but there's also a third one that goes there. So there's always crosswalks there. And the thing is police don't know that, and they write tickets for people. They say they're jaywalking. They don't realize what a crosswalk actually is. They think it has to be marked. It does not have to be marked. The intersection defines where crosswalks are. Okay, so the idea of good, better, best. Yeah, you can't always get the best the first time. This is actually, I think this is from before 1890, maybe 1880s. Roads are pretty bad. That's why we have streetcars, by the way. We don't have streetcars because it's a good transit option. We have streetcars because the roads were so horrific that if you were in a horse-drawn carriage, the mud, the bumpiness, it took extra horses to pull you. It was just disaster. And so companies paid money to the city to put rails in the street so that they used less horses, the ride was smoother, and it was a lot cleaner for everybody. And that's why we got streetcars. Once the roads got paved, it's like, okay, why do we have streetcars again? Because all the advantages of the streetcar kind of went away. So let's show good, better, best. This is Michigan Avenue in 2009. It was I guess that was a 7-lane road. And then we spent a lot of political capital to get to this. Just getting bike lanes. This is the first bike lanes on a state trunk line in Michigan. It took a tremendous amount of capital. We had to go to the deputy director and convince them that it was not illegal to do this. And because the local project engineer, I mean, it was so bad. I was in a meeting with Rashida Tlaib, who was the state rep at the time. She had to hold me back. She had to calm me down. And you know, Rashida can be a real fighter. And I was really going too far, I guess. But anyways, we got him, and afterwards, the local engineer who opposed me said, "Yeah, we listened to the community and we put in bike lanes." Like, whatever. So then over time, they became protected bike lanes, which still aren't great. But now, this is an outdated rendering, but now we're getting sidewalk level bike lanes. So it just takes time for things to happen. So what are we doing this year? First and foremost, we're trying to get a complete streets ordinance passed in Detroit. So complete streets are streets that are, you guys know this, designed for all users to go along and to go across. We've been working on this since 2010, and it's restarted. I think we're in a good place. We just have to convince, I think, one person, and then we're good. Okay. But he happens to be the director of DPW. But I think we're going to get it done this year. Councilwoman Letitia Johnson is great, and she's helping with this, and she's fighting for this as much as we are. And we have really good draft bill language right now. We just need to get DPW to say, fine, just do it. So that's what we're waiting on. But hopefully early this year, we'll get that done. Because we want, I tell the DPW, you're doing complete streets now. This is a way to preserve your legacy for future administrations to follow. We're going to revitalize our Bike to Everywhere event, which used to be Bike to Work Day, on May 16th. Don't know the details of that yet, but we do have some sponsorship dollars. We've been working on pedestrian bridges, mainly the ones across the lodge. Pedestrian bridges are forgotten infrastructure. For some reason, I think perhaps illegally, they're not considered bridge assets in Michigan. That's something I need to follow up with the Michigan Asset Committee. But they're because they don't carry cars, the feds don't care. And the state has been ignoring them, and the ones on the lodge have been falling into terrible disrepair. You probably heard about the guy who fell through the Spruce Bridge, right? Survived, he's okay. He ended up going to the Tiger game right after but the bridge is closed permanently, and MDOT says, you don't need that bridge. And then the Canfield Bridge got closed. And all the other three bridges are on the deathbed. They're not going to make it that long, and MDOT does not have plans to replace them until 2050. 2050, yeah. Wow. So this is a major priority for the city. They're like, MDOT, you need to replace these. You need to fix these bridges. And so MDOT did put in a Reconnecting Communities grant to replace all 5. Did not get awarded. But you just saw that some recent state money is going to fix the Montcalm Bridge, which is fine. It's open today. I wish we could really open the Canfield Bridge. So MDOT's looking at carbon reduction program funding, if that program still exists. We'll see. Unfortunately, it has carbon in its name. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll get money to rebuild and reopen the Canfield Bridge. In the meantime, we got a grant from People for Bikes to do a road diet on the service drive. The Lodge service drive has 6 lanes. And it's like, it encourages cars to go fast, and then when you come off that pedestrian bridge, you make that last turn, you are like on the service drive. It's like you're being set up to get hit by a car going fast. So we want to take away that inside lane from the service drive, do a pilot with just sticks and posts and paint, and just to see how it works out. It's gonna be great. But and so hopefully that can be designed for other service drives where cars get really badly because it's an extension of the freeway. We just wrapped up a vulnerable road user report. We're part of a group that is in the Midwest, and transportation bill required all the DOTs to do vulnerable user safety assessments. So we analyzed Michigan's, what was good, what was bad. It was their first one, so it wasn't too horrible. And then we also did some walk audits and took that information, and we're giving it to the city of Detroit because we did the walk audits on streets that are receiving federal funding to be improved for safety. So they can take that feedback, the sidewalk's bad here, this is bad, they can take that feedback and improve the road for the community. We have a bicycle history tour grant, which we're wrapping up. So it's going to be a bicycle tour of all the historical bicycle history in Detroit, and it is amazing. You would not believe it. I mean, Horatio Earl's in it, Edward Hines is in it. There's some crazy people in there. This guy, that guy, he lived in Corktown. He was the second person. He set the 25-mile bicycle world record. He set the 24-hour world record on this bike, and then he rode across the United States on this bike. And the roads weren't really there yet, so he rode on the railroad tracks on the ties, and he would wheelie onto his front wheel because the back wheel would slam into the ties. He could ride a front wheelie. But unfortunately, he wasn't the first person to do it, and he didn't write a story about it, so he never got recognized. But then he got into the automotive industry, and most famously, he met and became a lifelong friend and supporter and coach for Major Taylor, the major black cyclist who was a world champion. So he's got a really interesting story. That'll be part of the tour. But I did apply for a state historic marker, which we got approved for the first bicyclist to ride in Detroit. And I'm just trying to get a landowner to give me permission to put the sign up. We'll have to fundraise for the sign, but the state historic commission has approved our sign for the first Detroit bicyclist, whose name was Ben Fletcher. We're still working on e-bike purchase incentives. Unfortunately, that bill at the state level died in lame duck. It got out of the House last minute, and the Senate never took a vote on it because there were still some Dems opposing it. And there is $2.95 million in the current budget contingent upon that bill passing. So, like, can we somehow rescue that money with a Republican House? I don't know. We'll see. We're staying on top of federal grants and whether they get clawed back. It's really a iffy time for Detroit, and I don't think people know across the country what's happening. I just got word on my way here today that the pause on some of them are supposed to be lifting soon. Very involved in climate. I was the bike walk person on the Michigan Healthy Climate Mobility Committee, which was mostly EV people, and so I butted heads quite a bit with them because they have this focus of everyone has to drive EVs and our problems will be solved. I'm like, no, a lot of the same problems with EVs are the same problems we have with ICE vehicles. You know, we need to solve some bigger problems, get more people biking and walking, and taking transit. So me along with Megan Owens from TRU, we've been working on that. We're also working on changing how MDOT prioritizes what projects they do. Oftentimes it's based upon just the quality of the pavement, or a company gives them money or something. We want to change it so they consider safety, they consider the climate, and so on. And then I'm on numerous committees. One is the Green Task Force, which Strongtown probably should participate in. That's under Scott Benson, and that's all things green and sustainable, and I co-chair the Transportation and Mobility Task Force. I-375, there's multiple advisory committees. I think it's turning out better than it was before. I know some people are still pushing back on it, but I think it's getting better and better. And then some other statewide, local, the GTSAC is the Governor's Transportation Safety Action Committee. It's so frustrating, some of the people at state level. This is often run by Office of Highway Safety Planning, which is part of the Michigan State Police, and they just have this set framework that all we need to do is have more law enforcement and more education, and everyone will be safer. And it's like, that hasn't worked for 100 years. Why is it going to work now? And so they just announced a new thing. By 2030, we're going to have a 30% reduction in traffic fatalities through more education and more law enforcement. So I asked the director, after she was done, I said, how are you going to achieve that when your law enforcement numbers are down significantly? She's like, yeah, they are down significantly. Like, what are you doing? You know, it's frustrating. Also, a little plug for the Ontario Bike Summit. It's going to be in Windsor this year, and they're coming to Detroit on Friday, May 30th, I think it is. It's expensive. It is Canadian dollars, but it's pricey to go to, but it's kind of cool. And then, unfortunately, this should be at the front of my list. Building Detroit Greenways Coalition capacity and fundraising. That should be at the front, but unfortunately, it's at the end. So some highlights. What's happening? The Gordie Howe Bridge should open this year. Right? I mean, mean, this is a worldwide significance. I don't know if many folks realize this. I mean, how many international trails are being built right now for biking and walking? And there's not going to be any tolls. It's going to be for your rent. You're going to be completely separated from cars the entire way. You're going to have your own customs booth. It leads to a path that takes you to your bridge, which is your own path on the bridge. You go to your own little customs booth on the other side. And then you're connected. Joe Louis Greenway on one side and all the Trail Network on the other side in Windsor. It's going to be great. As part of the bridge agreement, they're also improving all the roads around the plaza. So there's like a new Greenway segment going in along Jefferson. They've already done some protected bike lanes on 4th Street. You might have seen that. I think Green Street's getting some improvements, and Campbell's getting a shared use path. There's also more Joe Louis Greenway segments planned. Unfortunately, this cold weather, they haven't been able to pour as much cement as they were like last winter. But this year they expect to open up the segment at least from Joy Road all the way up to 96. And then even the section beyond that on the other side of 96 from Intervale Park, something like that. And then also Highland Park section. They fixed up the old rail bridge over Woodward, and that's been part of the trail. So it's super exciting. There is a critical grant that who knows what's going to happen because the city hasn't signed the agreement yet with Federal Highway. Maybe the Trump administration will pull it back, but that grant would build a trail bridge over the Grand Trunk Railroad in Highland Park, which would be amazing, right? You could go over the bridge and watch trains go by. We'll see what happens. Safe Streets for All, I'll talk about that in my next slide. West Warren Streetscape got approved. That's money that Gabriela Santiago Romero got, and they're improving West Warren between the Joe Louis Greenway and Livernois. Which is exciting, and then also Dearborn is taking over as you head west. They got a $25 million grant, which hopefully will still stick around, to do a massive improvement to West Warren for biking and walking and retail and all that. Dexter Streetscape should finish this year. It's pretty close. Belle Isle improvements. I mean, they've been doing some changes to the road. They just released the mobility plan. And then the plan is also to extend the existing trail all the way around the island. So right now it's only partially with a break over by the yacht club. That should all get under construction this year. I don't know if it'll be finished this year, but it'll be a completely separated path all the way around the island, roughly between the road and the water. And then the trail there, Rogel Park, should be going in this year as well. Yes, I mentioned Safe Streets for All. Detroit has been, the Biden administration was really good in Detroit. Uncle Joe was very good. He awarded $62.5 million in Safe Streets for All money to Detroit. I think we're probably number one in the country for that. But the unfortunate side is we also had the highest pedestrian fatality rate of all, many major cities too. So the idea is using a safe system approach, which is, and one of the aspects of that is road crashes aren't distributed evenly across the network. There are some roads that totally get far more fatalities and serious injury accidents than other roads, and that you should really prioritize those more dangerous roads, like Gratiot. I think it's 0.5% of all road fatalities in the state of Michigan occur on Gratiot in Detroit. It's unbelievable. So that's what the city came up with the tie injury network, and this year they're doing the quick builds, which are the quick fixes with paint posts, and then next year they're going to be doing some of the more serious concrete changes to some of the other roads. But yeah, this is their plan. This is just one $25 million grant. The other $25 million was to improve intersections for pedestrians and bus stops. And then the third one was improvements to Gratiot Avenue. So that's it.
That's great. No, thank you. So, and then we're going to do some Q&A time. Like, I think that was incredible. How long time?
We got so much time.
Yeah, we got so much time.
Coffee,
Yeah, I love it, exactly, yeah. So, if you have any questions, this is the time to do it. So I'm going to start off with, again, I was going to ask earlier, what was the process like of starting Detroit Greenways? Like, what was the political climate like? How did the challenges that you faced, how did you grow it to where it is today, like that journey?
Yeah, well, I'll even back up a little further how I even got into trail advocacy, because I'm a software engineer by trade, which I loved and hated at the same time, because everything you wrote, all your software you wrote is like thrown away eventually, right? And like, what's your legacy? Oh, I wrote code that existed, for a while. So I started doing work with Michigan Mountain Biking Association. Yeah, I volunteered to be like the vice president of the Southeast Michigan, the Southeast chapter of the Michigan Mountain Bike Association, because the vice president doesn't do anything. The president disappeared. I mean, literally disappeared like 2 weeks later, and I became the president. And so I got really into that. We really got into learning how to do the advocacy with communities, getting trails built. Back then, it was a lot of people thinking mountain biking was like the people in the Mountain Dew commercials, rad, all that stuff. And it was not. And so we had a lot of trails built. Like the mountain bike trails in Stony Creek were going to be closed, and we saved those. So we had some pretty good wins. And then I started doing some volunteer work for, or not volunteer, I was paid for Rails to Trails. We got some funding to investigate rail trail opportunities in Southeast Michigan. And we ended up focusing on what became the Clinton River Trail, Home Orchard Trail, and I forget what was called the third trail, but along with Paint Creek, which was already existing. So we did all the groundwork to make that happen, helped get grants in and all that. And then once I had that working with Rails to Trails, Rails to Trails eventually then became Michigan Trails and Greenways Alliance, and they said, wow, we need someone part-time to do website work, and we need someone to do part-time to help with this new group of Greenway people in Detroit. And I'm like, hey, I can do both. Right? I'm a software guy and a Trails guy. So that's how I fell into it, and then eventually the software stuff was done, and it was full-time Greenways Coalition. But early on, we were battling the most basic things, and just to get a bike lane painted on the street, right? We're fighting over paint, and it was unreal. Some of the battles. We're like, you repaint the streets every year, or at least you should. Just move it. Just make it different. It's not expensive. Paint is 86 cents a foot, right? And they're like, yeah, I guess we could do that. So then one year we did like 70 miles of bike lanes and sharrows, which was like unbelievable for us. We thought that was amazing. One thing we did that was really helpful was we brought in the leading traffic engineer on bikes, perhaps in the world, at least in the United States. He actually, when he said he wrote the book, he actually didn't write the book, And he convinced our traffic engineers, like, you can do this. What are you talking about? Just solve your problem. It's just math, just move things around. Not a big deal. And then our traffic engineers were like, oh, okay, all right. And they did. A lot of times people are fearing change. That's not how we've always done it. It's like, yeah, right, but it's not that bad to change it, So, some of the battles that were happening, even on the Gordie Howe Bridge, I got MDOT so mad at me. How dare you go around our back? Hey, you guys weren't doing it. So, basically, here's how the pathway came about, is that Simone she was at that time Southwest Detroit Environmental Division, submitted comments about the bridge saying it needs to have a path on it. And MDOT came back and said, oh, yeah, we'll allow the path on the bridge if Customs allows it. Well, they knew Customs was not going to allow it because Customs is a pain in the butt. And they would say no to everything. They said no to the ferry. So I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. MDOT's got it out. So what I did is I wrote my contact at Senator Levin's office, and I said, these are all the reasons why we should have bikes and paths on this new bridge. They copied and pasted my text, put it on Senator Levin's letterhead, sent it off to the Director of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. And she came back and said, well, Senator Levin, of course, we'll work with you to make that happen. So we took that letter. Oh man, it's a happy dance. And then I sent that over to my Member of Parliament, Brian Massey, who gave it to the Ontario Ministry of Transport. And then he realized, oh, Senator Levin? Oh, this is serious. Maybe we do have to do this. And that kind of took the whole thing and made it serious. Because Customs said, yeah, we support you. We're going to make it happen. So MDOT was boxed in. They were so mad.
How mad were they, Todd? Tell me about the meeting where were they really pissed off?
He wasn't that bad. He didn't even know me. But he wouldn't respond to my emails, you know, because I'm just a little guy. He didn't need to respond to me. And then when I got this done, you know, he was a little upset.
Well, we had a big push on the Canadian side, of course, which you're familiar with, but it's Dwight Duncan, you know, who was the head of the bridge at the time, like he said, absolutely no bike lanes, but obviously it turned around before he left. I was wondering too, though, as you know, that there's public art projects connected with the bridge, mainly commissions, and you're familiar with the two entrances or exits, depending on which way you're going on the bridge on the American side and on the Canadian side. But there's supposed to be possibilities of signage, like to entice people to go through Sandwich Town, and a little bit about the history and stuff like that. We don't know the details on it yet, but on the Canadian side, at least, there's no actual, like it just looks like a fenced-in corridor where you go into the Canadian Customs thing. And I've been part of the bridge group, focus group, since its beginning on the Canadian side, and have some ideas. Like the last year for the grants has already passed. That due date was January 29th, and it was only up to 50,000 anyways. And what I'm thinking about might cost a little bit more, but there's still money available from a multitude of sources. And so perhaps I could talk with you through the internet or after a bit about the possibility of, how should I say, to signify the entrance for the bikeway on both sides. Like you'd be more concerned on your side. I have particular ideas for the Canadian side actually, but could be a good coalition to get together on that.
Yeah, definitely. You know, we talked about, I don't know where it stands now, but we talked about doing something on the U.S. side, some artwork. Because there's, I don't know if you guys remember the old 4th Street Bridge over the Rouge River. It was a Bastille Bridge, and they have leftover steel. And I said, well, let's do like a gateway, welcome to Detroit, with this old bridge steel, and tell the story of how bridge construction has changed from big girders of steel to cable-stayed bridges. And yeah, it didn't really go anywhere. I don't know if it.
Well, no, they did do a sculpture at 4th Street way down there, and there's a stormwater feature around it too, and some plaques and everything. So that happened, and that was with partially with bridge money, not totally, but partially with bridge money.
Yeah, so we had leftover steel from that project.
Oh yeah, right.
So a lot of what we talked about was interacting with, obviously, local government, state government. What kind of interactions do you have in the Greenway Coalition with, like, private property owners? You know, whether it's, you know, working with them to incorporate, you know, things on their own land, or, you know, respecting the bike lanes during construction and that kind of stuff. Like, what interaction do you have with those kinds of projects? I don't interface much with private landowners. Well, let me preface it also with Livernois. It's great that they have the sidewalk to do stuff on, but they're constantly people will pull their cars up and just be in the bike lane or go. And so I mean, is that honestly falls on the city for enforcement and stuff, but.
Yeah, that would. I would say Liv 6 would be more on top of that, or
okay, so the local.
Yeah, or the Department of Neighborhoods.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because they're there all the time.
Yeah.
It's education, and some people just don't necessarily care too much.
Yeah.
So there's people like at Baker's. They're always parking illegally. I don't understand why the police don't. They're parking on the sidewalk clearly.
Yeah.
And it's not parking.
Well,
there's
the
parking
police are parking on the
nearby.
sidewalk 80% of the time.
Yeah. So we don't interface too much with. I am starting to work a little bit more with people who want to get bike racks.
Oh, okay.
Because getting bike racks on city property is a pain in the butt.
The right-of-way permits.
Yeah, you have to get a right-of-way permit. You have to do a site plan. You have to submit your permit
Stamped
money.
drawings.
They have to be stamped.
Yeah.
Okay. So
where can a private business put? Can they put it on the sidewalk within a certain distance? Does it have to be on the side of their building or what?
it's easier to put it on their own property.
Okay.
But I'm looking at options. We have a new deputy director of Complete Streets,
Mm-hmm.
and she's still working on things, figuring this all out, and I'm kind of giving her a little bit too much work, I think, maybe, and this is one of them. But I'm thinking, let's figure out what the total burden is, and can we just get an ordinance that says if you have the right to install a bike rack within X number of feet of your building, as long as it doesn't interfere with sidewalk traffic. Because there is an ordinance that says you can use the first 3 feet from the side of your building as long as the sidewalk is, I think, 10 feet from the curb. So there's already a precedent for allowing people to use sidewalk without going through the whole permit process. So maybe we could do the same thing for bike racks, which was allowed actually in 1896.
Okay.
They had an ordinance for bike racks.
So I've installed bike racks on Agnes and Virtual before, and the total costs for the permit and the engineering drawings, and just like the sheer volume of time, was greater than the actual act of installing or fabricating the bike racks. And I was just like, this is bonkers. And throughout the entire process, it was very much a case of, I don't know what value this process is generating for the city. It's not making people any safer. It's not making the sidewalks any more usable. It's just another example of one of those things where you have mid-level bureaucrats that are very wedded to this one thing that they have and they do, and like it's sort of like their security zone.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, and the thing is that a lot of people skirt that. You can go around and you know, they have online open data, they have all their permits. There's so many people violating it, you know, illegal stuff because they just don't want to deal with it. There are times where it makes sense, like right now, like the Fisher project, you know, Milwaukee Junction. They have a major site plan going in because they're doing a bunch of stuff, and there's bike racks. So in that case, it makes sense because there's no, you know, throwing in the bike racks is no extra cost, right? But if you just want to do a bike rack, it's ridiculous.
Do you have any update on the individual that was ticketed for riding outside of the bike lane, and kind of what the reaction's been from the from law enforcement, and any like tips on how do we educate law enforcement? Because if we're struggling with drivers that don't know the law, and then law enforcement that doesn't know the law, any advice?
Yeah, so the update on that is I'm meeting, I brought this before Councilwoman Letitia Johnson, and we're meeting with the police commander for that area, that precinct on the 17th. So yeah, he was totally in the right.
Can you explain what happened?
Sure, so what happened is that he was biking westbound on the Mack Bridge, just west of Connor, which is like a 6-7 lane bridge. It's with protected bike lanes, right? But the bike lanes were completely covered in snow, so he was riding where there was no snow, which is totally legal. The law says you don't have to ride to the far right if there's due to surface conditions. But he still got pulled over and given a citation. And they also pulled another person over and gave them a citation. So yeah, it's police not knowing the law. I mean, the laws are complicated, overly complicated, because they're written by people who are more like transportation engineer perspective, you know, and everyone's going to follow all these arcane things. We really need to have simpler laws that are easier to understand and make biking less illegal, so that they can enforce these kinds of things. But we'll hopefully get this resolved on the 17th. And there is a bike training program. I can say that the League of Michigan Bicyclists had asked DPD about offering it, and for the last few years they haven't heard anything back. But the day after this story broke, they contacted the league, said, "Hey, you have a class trained law officers?" So yeah. So we'll see. They're making progress.
You said during your presentation how throughout your work you've been told no a lot of times. Since this organization's like pretty young, how could you offer like some advice? Like what kept you motivated and persistent?
I think it really depends on the situation. So, you know, sometimes I'll go around a person if they're just a stick in the mud and refuse to do anything. I usually bring to the table more facts, and I'm more informed on things than they are. So, for instance, you know, I was going up against an MDOT person saying we can't put bike lanes on 4th Street near the Marathon plant, which is a 6-lane boulevard. And I said, you're just changing the paint. Why don't you just put the bike lanes in? They said, well, you know, if I-75 ever breaks down, you know, we need these 6 lanes to move cars. I said, you're moving them to a 4-lane bridge. And they're like, oh, yeah, right, that doesn't make sense, does it? They didn't say that. Then they shifted to, we're already approved, so that's it. But, no, you have to be smarter than them. There's a lot of things that they don't know. They're like law enforcement too. You know, we had an issue with, I asked for bike lanes on a bridge, two bridges that MDOT's were doing. And I said, yeah, are you planning on putting bike infrastructure on those bridges? And they're like, no. I said, is federal dollars involved? Yes. I said, oh, then you're not going to follow US code 23. Blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, you didn't know about that. So now those bridges are going to have, you know, bike infrastructure put in. So things like that, you know, knowing more than them is just really helpful. And being logical. You don't have to, you know, don't give them a whole laundry list of things, some that are maybe shaky. Just stick to your good points and just be consistent.
And I've worked with Todd on a number of different projects over the year, and if you ever have a question about transportation or transit or anything, Todd has so much background in institutional and historical and legal knowledge that he can answer pretty much not only anything you can throw his way, he will point you in the right direction of where you should be headed. He is a transportation genius.
Well, I will say that law that you had to ride to the far right of the road, I actually was involved in making that happen in 2004. It was Senator McManus from Traverse City who wanted to change the law so bikes had to ride single file. And we're like, no, that's not going to happen. So I started this big viral, well, this was like 2004, so viral for 2004. But she said it was the most response she'd ever got on any bill she'd ever introduced. And she introduced the hunting of mourning dogs bill. And she said, we totally blew that one away. And so she met with us and we said well, why don't we just update all of Michigan's bike laws to the current best practices? And that's what we did and got them passed. So, yeah, that's something I'll share with the police officer on 17. I know these laws, help pass them.
Oh, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but our current mayor in Windsor is canceling the tunnel bus, which has been around for ages. And I was wondering if we could maybe liaison, because you know, the aspect of bike racks on the bus, and you know, despite the Gordie Howe Bridge having the bike lanes, and that it's still it gives us a gratuitous route and another alternate, and you know, and even for tourism, like in the wine district in Essex County and so forth, all the bike lanes in Essex County. If maybe you could get coalesce on some ideas for at least a protest letter or something like that, or
yeah, or maybe meeting with DDOT too and see if there's something that Detroit could do to help.
sure, okay.
Because yeah, I love that. I love the tunnel bus. It's very convenient. I've only used it for biking, but yeah, it's downtown to downtown.
Yeah.
I was involved too with the Windsor Bike Committee because they used to have racks on the buses, but they weren't allowed to lower the racks when they crossed the border. So they had concerns with the buses hitting the tunnel on some of those turns, but they realized they could do it. So the Windsor folks got them to do that. So yeah, definitely want to keep that going. Yeah, Rio?
So I got a question about bike lanes, right? So who ice-wise cleans the snow? I mean, cleans the ice out the bike lanes? Because
DPW.
Okay, because some of the bike lanes, they're not even trying to clean.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't mind getting into the regular street, but police can put me in jail before on the bike. I'm not trying to do that again.
Yeah, so that's a problem. I mean,
it's 12 guns on me. It ain't funny.
It's the street maintenance division, and so they're supposed to prioritize clearing the roads first and then do the bike lanes, and sometimes I think they just forget about the bike lanes part. I just rode cast though all the way down. They were pretty good shape, except they put way too much salt on them. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's true. Some of them got either too much snow, too much salt.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's it? Being on the board or the advisory boards at the state and local level, what's it like usually being one or two voices that talk about things besides cars in planning and development?
Oh, it's not bad at all. So, I mean, I think that's common misunderstanding that MDOT is some monolith. The planners for this region are on our side, right? If they weren't part of MDOT, they'd be here part of this group advocating for the same stuff. They have to fight internal battles within MDOT. So a lot of those times, those meetings are positive. You're giving them ammunition to take back to their engineer to say, no, we need to do something different. So yeah, it's much more mixed than you might think.
The nature of it being a coalition means that you have to deal with a lot of organizations, some of which don't share the exact same goals. So when you come up against organizations or people in organizations that don't support one project that another one is, how do you navigate that? And I ask this because in last June's I-375 public MDOT meeting, there was a woman who was literally part of the Connor Creek Greenway board or whatever, and she was advocating against the removal
She's
of...
not our too.
Okay, how do you navigate that when it seems to me that she views greenways only as leisure things that should be kept separate, and that she literally said, we are the motor city, stop adding all these bike racks. How do you navigate that?
I'm trying to do that really. So, people have different views. I hope that we can bring people around. There have been times, I will say, one example of I was talking about the Joe Louis Greenway with this community, and this woman was really like, why should I support this greenway when the city's not fixing the streetlights? They're not getting rid of the burned out buildings. They're not picking up getting rid of blight. And I go, you know what? You shouldn't support the greenway. I said you should hold it hostage to the city, and tell the city you don't want a greenway going past blight with the streetlights out. I said hold it hostage, and she's like, oh, that's a good strategy. And so she got what she wanted, because the city actually, a little bit later, but the city expanded what the trail was to include those things in it. And so then she became a big supporter of it, right? We're at the next meeting, she's like, yeah, we need protected bike lanes for the cyclists and all. I'm like, what? But that's how you do it. I mean, you work people through it, and people have reasons for feeling the way they do, and sometimes they don't have all the information. Sometimes they have information that you don't know and you need to learn. So, yeah, it's a process.
Okay, two things. One is I got here late, so I'm just wondering if there's a way to sort of know. It wasn't clear on the Facebook page what would be talked about tonight in the event, so I would appreciate, not from you, but from people running, to know sort of if there's anything I missed. We talked about that later. The other thing is I live in a suburb, so I live in Rochester Hills, which has the trails. But there's people that want a new crosswalk to be built. I'm just wondering where there's not one now, how do you navigate that? How do you build support for something like that outside of the city of Detroit? Because we have all these suburbs which also have the same potential for cyclability, all that stuff, and similar challenges.
So is this a mid-block crossing?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little bit difficult because there's guides that are produced that say you need to hit all these warrants to justify it. Like what you need is basically pedestrians get killed, and then it's like, oh, okay, we can put a crosswalk in now. There has been more flexibility. I'm not that familiar with the guides itself, but there's more flexibility in being able to put one in. But you got to get your engineers on board to do it. And then you have to look at whether you need special traffic control lights. Sometimes, depending on the road, you can do like the Joe Louis Greenway's got rapid flashing beacons that don't force the cars to stop, but they run lines and they may have to yield to a pedestrian or bike. Or the ones on Wayne State campus, you've seen the ones that flash red, the hawk signals. Those are just a lot more money. But there's money available to do this. So money shouldn't be an issue. There is safety money available.
I guess what I wanted to ask is there's how do you advocate for these things? Especially if it's not a city controlled road.
Oh.
How do you get?
Is it Rochester Road?
It's Liquor Road.
Oh, it's County Road?
Yeah, it's a county.
Oh, you're screwed. No, because I will say it, because the road commission for Oakland County is the worst, probably the worst road agency. You're recording it. That's okay. They hate me already. He's one of the worst. They don't care about bikes and pedestrians. Now, so you have to go to your city, and the city does have some way of forcing the county to do some things, so they can work together and maybe agree to getting a crosswalk put in there. But the county won't do it. The county road commission won't do it on their own. Now things might change. Like I mentioned early on, you may not have been here, but county road commissions are a completely separate form of county governments. Maybe Oakland County will get rid of theirs. I've been trying to make that happen. But
Get rid of it, you mean like just
combine it, make it a department of Oakland County. So then you could go to your commissioner and they could actually, report. There'd be some responsibility. As it is now, they're separate, and there's just 3 appointed people. So yeah, I would start with your city and asking your traffic people about that and see if, because there is grant funding available to do it.
they have a good track record on these things, so I think that would.
Yeah, and you can also go onto the Michigan Traffic Crash Facts website, look up the map and see where crashes have occurred on the street. And that could help you make your case for whether the crosswalk should go in there or not. Problem is, it only tells you who's been hit by a car. It doesn't tell you like people who refuse to cross there but want to cross there. It doesn't talk about latent demand.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more, like you mentioned about the Gordie Howe Bridge Trail and connecting the Michigan trails and the Essex County trails, and also like the Cross Canada Trail or Trans Canada Trail, and so it's it's broader than even local. It's regional and international, of course. But the other thing too about the Joe Louis, about connecting neighborhoods and the economic benefits and social benefits and environmental benefits as well too. Like even the new kids playground they built at the Warren Gateway, like that is designed with a theme by a Detroit architect, Smith Associates, as bridging communities. And I actually went down the chute. It's built, you're supposed to be under 12 to go down the slide, so you don't slide, I didn't slide very good, but it was fun anyways, because you got to really climb up through all this maze to get up there. But like say 333 Midland in Highland Park, an art thing that's been around studios for a good 12 years, so first started by a guy from New Zealand, and he has big plans. If you're probably familiar with, just down the street, I forget what street it's on now, but another old abandoned building that he wants to make into artist lofts, and it'll be right adjacent to the Joe Louis Trail. So that is like this interconnection of things perpetuating other things that are beneficial for the neighborhood and the entire circuit of the city. And also, as you mentioned, like going through Highland Park, through Hamtramck, through Dearborn and Detroit, and connecting to the riverfront trails as well too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when Detroit, the city decided to start the construction of Joe Louis Greenway in the Midwest retirement area, a lot of bicyclists were like, no, let's just start with the DeCorner Cut and extend it further north. But the city knew that they had strong neighborhood there and advocates who were going, and it was going to affect that neighborhood more than anything else because they'd not seen investment in decades. And so it was so smart to start there, and then you build support for the Greenway. Oh, look what it's doing to Midwest retirement. I want some of that in my neighborhood. And so now, it's going around the city, and it will connect into 333 Midland, which there's interesting. I don't know. There was a railway spur that came off and went to that building. I don't know if the city bought that or not. It was owned by Conrail, but yeah, there's going to be so many interesting things along the route. The corner cut's nice, but you're below grade and you're not interacting with things so much. When you're on the Joe Louis Greenway, you're going to see things in the neighborhood, and people, and more signage, and telling the story of the neighborhood, and and plus all the great food along the route. It's just going to be amazing. I mean, it's just going to be
And the different aspects of the trail, because some of it's on street and some it's independent pathway. And
Yep. It's a mix. I mean, every type of road infrastructure you will see along the Joe Louis Greenway for sure.
I think final question for 7:30 here is how can we as Downtown Detroit as advocates help get involved and support your work?
Well, when the Complete Streets Ordinance goes before City Council, we'd love some support there. That would be great.
Good.
Yeah, I just don't know when that's going to occur, but we'll see.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you.